Good morning, Professor Jürg Gertsch. You are a biochemistry and molecular medicine teacher at the University of Bern, and you are one of the chairs, together with Professor Rudolf Brenneisen, of the International Medicinal Cannabis Conference that will happen this week on 13 and 14 February at the University of Bern. Anticipating this event, my first question would be, what were the motivation that made you organize this event?
Good morning, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with you. So the motivation, I think, came originally from Rudolf Brenneisen. He has been organizing several conferences, as you know, in the past, and he always wanted to do one in Bern. And since we are here now focusing on endocannabinoids and cannabis also since some years, we thought, okay, it's timely. There are also a lot of researchers in Bern, but also within Switzerland, with whom we have started to collaborate over the last year more intensively. And also given the political situation, sort of the legalization of medical cannabis for patients and the dynamics in Switzerland and worldwide, we thought it's about a good time to bring together industry, physician, researchers, and also patients to discuss the current state and the future of cannabis, medical cannabis. So that was the idea. And also, of course, Bern is an ideal place. It's in the middle of Switzerland, so people could come more easily. But that was the idea. Now we are doing it. Yeah.
And what are the main themes that will be discussed? And can you anticipate a little bit what is the current state of the research in cannabis and the endocannabinoid system?
As you can see on the program, the special thing about this conference, the IMCCB, is that we try to bring together really different disciplines. We have basic research related to how cannabis works, how cannabinoids work. So we have analytics, we have phytochemistry, and we have also talks related to the production of cannabis medicine. So what type of formulation is optimal? Also related to the complexity of the phytopharmacon cannabis sativa itself and how to formulate it. But then we have a lot on topics related to neuropsychiatry and neurology also. So are there benefits? Are there not just negative things that we can observe with cannabis, such as cannabis use disorders in the young population, but how could it be useful for patients and what is the current stage? So it's really bridging a lot of different topics. Also pain, we have an update on pain. That is a big topic. If you look worldwide, what is it prescribed most and used medically most? It's in the context of pain, specifically certain types of pain where there is hope that it works. And some people anecdotally say it works. It's neuropathic pain, pain related to chronic inflammation, are really hard to treat with current treatments. And we have also a talk which is very interesting, which came from an abstract. It's also related. How could we maybe replace opioids with cannabis, and how is that correlated? So do they synergize? Can you reduce the opioids, which also have a lot of side effects and can cause addiction, as we all know, with cannabis? So there is a lot of interesting topics. And what I find also interesting is that we also talk about cannabis use disorders, and of course it's different. The non-medical use and the medical use, they are definitely different, but in the end it's about THC, it's about other cannabinoids, it's also about CBD, which is often high in the strains, but it's also about many other cannabinoids which we don't know. And for us, I think the time now is really about the evidence-based medicine. We would like to know more. What is the status? What is needed in terms of clinical trials? So this will be moreover, overall the topics, so quite diverse, interesting, I think, I hope for a lot of people to listen to.
Yeah. 2 years ago, I remember I was sitting in the back of you and Professor Vincenzo Di Marzo, and you were talking and saying that you had this difficult task of having the most difficult talks and the most complex subjects because you are both studying biochemistry and Vincenzo in the case of the endocannabinoid. And can you tell us a little bit more or clarify what is exactly your area of study?
So that is right. When you start to talk about the endocannabinoid system, it becomes very complicated for
Mm,
lay people. It's sometimes easier to just talk about CBD or THC, but we should not forget that most of these cannabinoids, they interact with the endocannabinoid system. So there are receptors, there are channels, there are endocannabinoids that are derived from lipids, and they interact with inflammatory pathways that we all know. I mean, it's a fascinating biochemical system, and of course, Vincenzo Di Marzo has been working on this for decades,
yes.
and we also work in this field. So it's very much related to how fatty acids that we ingest through food and also we can make in our own body, but there are some essential fatty acids, how they are turned into good and bad lipids. And that is very much also reflected in the immune system. So there are effects in the periphery of endocannabinoids that are then signaling back to the brain. Generally, when people talk about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system, they think about the brain and what it does in the brain, but it's much more complex than that. And that's why what you mentioned, these talks are always very complex because it starts in the gut. The
Yeah.
gut communicates to the peripheral organs. The peripheral organs communicate back to the brain. So that is all very fascinating because it's holistic, and
Yeah.
of course it's a network. So we work also on the system because we think that although cannabis is fantastic, it can be fantastic if we understand it, that one could tailor medicines and therapeutics towards the endocannabinoid system more rationally so that you could interfere with certain things, reducing the side effects and maybe having only therapeutic effects or primarily having therapeutic effects. So that's the hope. But that is we can also learn from cannabis as a plant. It's interesting. There are a lot of molecules in there. They do all sorts of things in the system.
Yeah. So, and one of the major challenges in medicinal cannabis is the standardization and pharmaceutical formulation. Are we closer to achieving consistent and reproducible cannabis-based medicines or not?
Well, it's still a problem, I would think, because sometimes we just talk about cannabis and nobody knows exactly what it is. And it's for sure a drawback to say cannabis with this percentage of THC or maybe CBD. If you look at the authorities, they often only require THC content declarations. They don't care too much about everything else. And they are very, very powerful molecules that are in certain strains and they are not in other strains. And of course, we are trying to understand, are they relevant?
Mm,
Do they modulate the effects of THC or not? And it's a big problem when you say, okay, it's cannabis flowers, 12, 20% THC, and you compare it to cannabis flowers 10-20% THC, but they might be totally different because they have other constituents. For me, a good analogy is always like alcohol. If you think about wine, you have the
yeah.
red wine and the white wine. And we all know that the pharmacological effect is really different. With the white wine, you can get a little stimulated. You don't get tired so much. With the red wine, you can get very tired. It's heavy. However, the content of the alcohol is the same. And this is exactly what happens with cannabis flowers. They have the same amount of THC, but they can have different effects.
Yeah.
And we don't understand why that is. With the CBD, we started to understand, of course, CBD can counteract some of the negative effects of THC. That is why in Sativex, for example, or in the medical cannabis flower tinctures or formulations, there's always also CBD in there because you try to reduce the effects, the negative effects of THC. But I think there's much more, and we have to understand much more. It will be very difficult to standardize this because when you standardize, you have to define to what you standardize. That's
Mm-hmm.
it's a big issue. So yeah, I believe a lot needs to be done. I could also imagine that the monosubstances that you isolate from cannabis sometimes are more powerful for pharmacological applications than the extracts, because the extracts, even though for the industry it's interesting to claim that they have a fantastic extract that works, there is little proof of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we need to really better understand which molecules do really matter, and then start to standardize towards those as well, and not just THC.
So precisely, besides THC and CBD, there is a growing interest in minor cannabinoids and also terpenes. Do you know a little bit more, or can you tell us a little bit more about the research that's already been done with minor cannabinoids and terpenes and their therapeutical potential?
I mean, it's really fascinating that if you just look at the THC molecule, you think it's one molecule, of course, but actually the molecule has isomers, so there are
Mm.
different forms, and it can also be different plants, and they might have different pharmacological effects. That's a depth we have not looked at. But then THC similar molecules that are almost like THC, but they have maybe in the side chain one or two carbon atoms more or less. This dramatically changes the effects. Think about the THCV. That's very interesting. That has also been studied as a monosubstance in clinical trials in the US, and also we are looking into that in the context of medical cannabis. Instead of having only CBD and THC, also have a lot of THCV. Could be interesting because that has a shorter chain, and it antagonizes the CB1 receptor. So
Yeah.
it really makes a totally different effect. And when you start to mix these cannabinoids, they also have different effects in the periphery and in the brain. So that is being studied. There are also some very potent cannabinoids. They're more potent on the CB1 receptor than THC. Uh, Especially in recreational varieties, it seems that this has been selected for. What I find interesting is if you could, and that's also part of the research we're doing on cannabis, if one can shift the effect of cannabis extracts from CB1 towards CB2, so that they are more CB2 receptor active, which is also a receptor involved in inflammation and in pain, in
Yes.
chronic pain. So when you can activate that receptor, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
As as you might know, we have been working on the beta-caryophyllene, which is also a
Yes.
terpene that is in cannabis. It's also a terpene, a sesquiterpene that is in many plants that you eat daily in food. Actually, you ingest a lot. But there are interesting clinical studies, like also when you smoke cannabis and you have beta-caryophyllene at the same time, that actually protects your vessels from the damage from the oxidative stress. And
Oh,
that's also why companies selling cigarettes, they are actually adding it to
okay.
cigarettes, and it's all very interesting. So when smoking, mainly the non-medical use or maybe inhalation with a specified device or an electronic cigarette for medical purposes, I think the terpenes could also be important. However, when it's about ingestion, so more an oromucosal absorption or a gastrointestinal resorption, then probably it's mainly the cannabinoids that matter, because
Yeah.
we also eat a lot of those just in the normal diet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have to understand these things. But there's a lot of research. There's also research on on other major cannabinoids like CBG ongoing, as you know, and people have to understand how much do you need to get a positive effect. So in analogy to CBD, this will happen with other cannabinoids that you can
Yes.
easily extract from cannabis because this is being produced in tons and people produce tons of these molecules and now they are looking for a use. It's not, is this rational? Laura, I don't know, right? I mean, you say, okay, you have a plant here, and now let's isolate everything and just find some positive effect. It is not how you normally do it in drug development. There, you have a rationale, and then you develop something. And here it's the other way around. So we have the molecules, and now we look for positive effects.
Yeah. So,
It's maybe not ideal. Yeah.
and translating this to clinical practice, doctors now are mostly prescribing, for instance, in Portugal, they prescribe a flower, and the certificate of analysis that they have, it includes or it describes only the levels of THC and CBD. It excludes all the other cannabinoids, all the terpenes. Do you think that this is enough information for doctors, or they should have more in their certificate of analysis?
Yeah, I think it's not enough because we know we started to do a lot of analytics also on cannabinoids from cannabis and also because we are interested in the blood samples then. So we have these methodologies. And what you see in the flower is extremely not homogeneous. The THC content varies from where the UV light was bigger, like on the corolla and the lower part, it's different.
Yeah.
It can be different by 20%. We also have a poster about that from one PhD student. And then the problem is the flower is not stable. So the THC content decreases constantly. And probably the amount that is written on the bottle is actually not what's inside there in the end. It can really vary by a factor 20 or 30. And also they don't measure every flower. So they assume that the population of flowers is the same. And that's of course not true. So I'm a really skepticist related to the precision of the flower as an API. I think it's not precise. That is one thing. And the other, I wonder, why is the flower so popular? I mean, have you ever thought about that? Why do people, you are now allowed in the pharmacopoeia, the European pharmacopoeia, the flower is mentioned. And of course, we can say this is the active pharmaceutical ingredients. The flower can be sold as medicine. However, like other phytopharmaceuticals. However, I think, it's driven also by people who are really interested in smoking the cannabis flowers. They might be now ill and they might need medical cannabis. That's why they want these flowers. I
May
think one should go for other formulations. If you want to really have serious products where doctors understand what they're doing, their limitations and positive effects, I think it's not enough to sell a flower. It's the problem.
could it be also because the effect is faster and the intake, vaporizing or smoking is faster and it has a most immediate effect rather than taking oils or tinctures. Could it be this the case?
It also, of course, sort of conditioning. You can feel an effect very fast, and that's maybe good because then you associate the medicine with an immediate effect that you can
Yeah.
feel. Could be, um, spasmolytic even. I mean, that's what people
Yeah.
can feel. So you're right. For certain patients, the inhalation is definitely positive. But I think, there are ways where you could also formulate standardized extracts for inhalation and vaporization. It doesn't need to be the flower. The flower also, of course, they always have the problem also of microorganism. I mean, they're very strict, but there are also all sorts of things you can do to reduce the amount of microorganisms, but they are there. The flower is perfectly suited to host many microorganisms. So maybe inhalation is not bad, as you say. It's because you can feel the effects, but maybe the type of formulation needs to be changed. Yeah.
So what about also these microorganisms? Many companies, they have to irradiate their flowers so they can
Yes.
sell them without the microorganism. What do you think of irradiation?
You know, if you, I've been talking a lot to growers of cannabis, and I think it's almost an illusion to produce flowers that are so big and dense, and you know that's for you want to produce high amounts without having microorganisms. So
Mhm.
probably if you go for these high yield inflorescences full of cannabinoids, so the mass relates to the amount of THC, for example, then you will have this problem, and there's probably no other way around unless you further extract it and further
Yes.
work with these flowers and make other products where of course the problem of microorganisms then gone. Yeah.
But what is the impact of irradiation in the flower, in the cannabinoids, in the terpenes? Do you know?
I mean, I've seen some data, and we also wanted to do some. I think it's minor. It's not,
Hmm.
depends on how you probably do it. But people generally only look at THC and CBD, so we don't know on the overall composition. There are some molecules that might be changed through the irradiation, and we are not aware. So maybe there are, whatever you do to a product, there might be some change, and maybe
Yeah.
we should know it. Yeah.
So the field of precision medicine is also evolving fast. How close are we to tailoring cannabinoid therapies based on like genetics, metabolism, and individual endocannabinoid profiles?
Yeah, I'm happy that you are asking this question because I find this the most interesting. It's definitely a hot topic for me as well. Everyone knows that some people react paradoxically, some profit from cannabis medicines, others don't. It's very clear that it seems to be almost that some groups benefit a lot and others not at all. And it would
Yeah,
be a pity to not understand that, because when you do randomized clinical trials, then you should also be aware of that. And I think the precision medicine approach is the way to go, and we need to understand more. I think it will take another 10, 20 years until we are there because it's very complex. We don't have the markers yet, but people are working on this so that we can maybe understand there are some genetic backgrounds and maybe some endocannabinoid system related deficiencies in patients who profit a lot when they have this medicine, and somebody else who would take the
they
same
don't.
doesn't
Yeah,
profit at all, or even it's not nice, even they could not profit. And we all know that when we think about the non-medical cannabis use, it is a huge difference. There are people, they're easily fall into these cannabis use disorders. They have addiction. Others, they will never have it, and some just don't like it at all, and they will never repetitively consume it. And unless we
yeah.
understand why that is, the biological basis, I think we can also not push the medical cannabis field beyond the next
Mhm.
barrier. Sorry.
No, no worries.
Mhm.
Um, what about the teaching all these things to the doctors and to new students on the faculties of medicine? Is this being done in Switzerland already?
Yes,
Because in
yeah.
Portugal, it's not yet, not really.
I mean, endocannabinoid system now in the medical curriculum is part of the physiology and neurobiology. This comes, and of course, then cannabis is also mentioned. Usually, it's more in the context of psychiatry, where you talk about drugs that are bad for your brain, or that
Yeah,
cause addiction. I mean, cannabis is the most widely used, in parts illegal. It depends on the country. Drug, psychoactive drug. So they talk about that. They teach how it works in the pharmacology. in terms of medical cannabis, we have in Bern the possibility to give seminars. So I give a seminar with the medical students in the third or fourth year where they can come. Yeah, it's free. It's not compulsory. They can listen to the developments and the problems and the questions and the advancements. And it's quite popular. So people like it. I also teach it to pharmacy students because in the Swiss pharmacies, it's now a big topic also.
Mm-hmm.
They have this formula magistralis, so pharmacists can actually uh, sell and formulate based on recipes from doctors. They can actually make the final medicine derived from cannabis or as cannabis flowers and sell it to the patients. So
Mm-hmm.
that they need to know that. They need to know how it is and what are the benefits and the problems associated to it. Yeah, so it's getting more and more strong here, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be taught at universities, and I hope that in Portugal also it will be taught. Maybe it is in some places. I don't know. You know better.
Yeah, I hope as well in the near future. So you see there is a growing interest in medicinal cannabis at the university where you teach.
Yes, yeah. There's definitely a growing interest also in research. We have more and more researcher working on this. We have these
Mm-hmm.
pilot trials also with the controlled non-medical cannabis usage. So where people
Mm-hmm.
try to understand who are these people, do they benefit from a controlled so when you can receive or obtain the cannabis products from the pharmacy rather than on the street where you don't know, or you grow it yourself where you don't know what you're taking. So in Switzerland we try to understand who are the people who regularly take it, why do they take it, and do they benefit in terms of safety and
Mm-hmm.
health overall. It's something that of course is important for the health of the community when they could obtain the cannabis directly from a pharmacy, you know, where they know what they get.
And also Switzerland is one of the first countries running all these pilot projects with recreational use of cannabis. How are they going, these pilot projects?
Yeah, they're all. Mhm. Yes, sorry.
And what implications will this have on the regulations and the policies in Switzerland in the near future?
Yeah, they're ongoing now. They are
Hmm.
data are being collected. There's still
In
people
four
being
cities,
involved.
no? Four cities? Yeah.
Areas, four different areas. That's right.
Yeah.
It's very nice. So we have the French speaking part. We have then also Bern, Basel, and Zurich, and Geneva, and there different researchers have different approaches, so it will be interesting to see what comes out of that. We are also in our lab, we collaborate with one project where we analyze also the blood samples from these trials,
Hmm.
not just looking at the content of cannabinoids, but specifically looking at are they different in terms of their endocannabinoid system compared to same age groups that are not cannabis users. So that's very interesting from a basic research point of view for us. Will the data that come out have an impact on the regulation? Could be. It's about the question: should we sell non-medical cannabis products in pharmacies?
Mm.
That I think that's the main question
And what do
because
you
now,
think? What is your opinion?
you know, I think it's being consumed anyway, and I think if the business that of course is associated to cannabis production and selling, if it's in a range where it is attractive to where people can actually get good quality standardized material, they know it's not toxic per se or there's no contamination. Would advocate for that because then it will surely increase the safety. Because if you don't do it, it will be done anyway, and people get their
Hmm.
products from everywhere. I mean, some grow it themselves, but there is a big illegal cannabis industry also, right? The
Yeah.
marijuana production industry in Switzerland, it's illegal. And it is a problem because there's a lot of profit associated to it. I could also imagine that the prices would go somewhere where it is more normal. I mean, Germany,
Mm-hmm.
they did it very radically, as you know. They somehow liberated it completely now,
Yeah.
but not for the production. So they don't want that there is an industry producing non-medical cannabis. So they leave it to the consumers, and they just don't want to penalize these people.
Yeah.
So in Switzerland, I think it's a little bit more structured the way we want to do it, but it will be based on the data. I think, I hope, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's nice that you are already collecting this data and you can study it for having better policies in the future. So, Professor Jürg, thank you so much for this
Welcome.
interview. It was very insightful, and I'm looking forward to meeting you Thursday and Friday at the University of Bern.
Good. Yeah. Thank you very much, Laura. I will see you in Bern then. Yeah. Bye. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye. Thank you.